Our topic for tonight is called redefining joy. You know, one of the most important things in life when a person is searching for something is to understand what it is that you're looking for. Because if you don't know what it is that you're looking for, even if you found it, you wouldn't know. So it's crucial to be able to define what it is that we're looking for. What are we trying to find? Now, in the Constitution of the United States of America, those of us who have read it, obviously, those of us in this room, I'm sure, that feel that there were people in the last month that have not read it, but whatever the case might be, without getting into myself into any hot water, the Constitution of the United States, it declares, in its attempt to find the most important things for the citizens of this great union, it declares that we should have the ability to have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's the most crucial thing, if you would imagine, that a person can try to find in their life. You could have everything in the world, but if you're not happy, you'd rather actually not be alive. So when the Constitution demanded this for the betterment of society, it makes us wonder, because if it's so important to a bunch of people, to the founding fathers of this country, surely it would be something that would be important to a religion which is so obsessed with the health of its adherents, with the fact that people should be leading powerful, important, considered lives. So if that's the case, so let's take a look and see what our Constitution says about this elusive thing called joy or happiness. You know, famous is the dictum that states, mitzvah gedolah lihiyot b'simcha. It is a great mitzvah to be happy, to be joyful. And that's the one that's always pointed at. But most people don't know that that's not actually in the Torah. It's not actually in the Mishnah. It's not actually in the Gemara. It doesn't appear until thousands of years later when it gets popularized in the rise of Chassidut. But there is a pasuk in the Torah that does say it. Tachat asher lo avadeta et Hashem Elokecha, because you did not serve Hashem your God b'simcha u'b'tuv levav, with joy and with a gladness of heart. And the Talmud tells us that this verse, this pasuk, is actually describing a time of such great sadness, a time of destruction, of upheaval, when the temple was destroyed, and they wondered, why did they deserve to be driven away from Jerusalem? That the temple should be risen to the ground. Why? Why were they driven into exile? Why did people die? Why did they have such terrible things happen to them? And the pasuk's answer, cryptic though it may be, is because they did not have joy. Clearly, the Torah places such a premium on simcha that even if they were doing everything else correctly, they were doing Talmud Torah, they were studying, they were doing charity one with the other, they were finding ways to open up gemachim and build beautiful schools and have fantastic mikvaot, everything that they should do, they were doing. But they weren't doing it with a smile on their face, and that was enough to warrant the most terrible punishments. Look at how much the Torah values simcha, joy. But if that's the case, my friends, I want to ask you a question that shook me when I first thought of it. You know how you live your life, and all of a sudden you have a question, and it's so powerful you wonder, how is it that I never asked that question? As a rabbi, I find it actually annoying. Not just annoying to go to other rabbis' classes, but I find it annoying when a rabbi asks a question, not a good question, an obvious question. Because I'm upset with myself. How do I lived my whole life, not making speeches, forget that stuff. I lived my whole life talking about this, thinking about this. How could something be so obvious and I missed it? And here's a question. It's very important. We all agree? And yet, every single morning, every single afternoon, and every single night, we have a prayer called the Shemona Esrei, the Amidah, the silent prayer. And in this blessing, we ask for many things, all important. And yet not one of the brachot asks for simcha. How could that be? We ask for brains. We ask for teshuvah, right? We ask for parnasah. We ask for Mashiach. We ask that our prayers should be answered. And we don't ask for happiness. I read something today that was sent to me by email that actually, it made me both very sad, ironically, and almost brought me to despair. It was one line, one statistic that is now true during Corona. In the age bracket of 18 to 24 years old, a full 25%, that's 1/4 of all young people 18 to 24 in America, report having had serious thoughts of suicide. 1/4. You have 4 kids, ask yourself which kid it was. You have 8 kids, ask yourself which 2 kids it is. You have 12 kids, make a zimun of depressed kids. But the point is, Rabotai, you're looking at something which is so real and so immediate and so important that we have to figure out how to talk about this in another way, how to communicate, how to access simcha in another way, or we'll have a serious problem on our hands. Why is there no bracha? As rabbis do, before I give you any closure or give you an answer to the first question, of course, I'll give you another question. One of my favorite things is to imagine any other job in which you could get away with that. Come to the doctor, you say, my right arm is broken. He says, I'm going to fix it. But first let me break your left arm. No one, right, you come, you busted one tire. The guy's like, no problem, I'll fix it. It's not only rabbis. I'm not sure why. I'm part of the problem, not the solution. All right. The Gemara tells us, Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. From the time that Adar begins, Marbim B'Simcha, we start dialing up. We bring excess joy into our lives. And that's a strange thing on many levels. Number one, what does that mean? Be joyful? What does that mean? Right? You ever woke up on the wrong side of the bed? You're really tired? And then someone comes and like, good morning! Does that make you more excited to be awake? Or does that make you want to commit first degree murder, right? What does that do? There's nothing more annoying to a person who's not besimcha than someone telling them, smile, be happy, right? Like, could you imagine? The guy's depressed, he wants to kill himself, and you're like, but it's Adar. Right? It's a strange, can we agree? It's a strange thing, right? And Rabotai, although this is actually a halacha, and it has halachic ramifications with regards to scheduling court cases, it has halachic ramifications, according to the Yerushalmi, that the entire month is a time which is appropriate to read the Megillah. We don't hold that way. In fact, that's what we say the Mishnah is coming to exclude when it says lo pachot v'lo yoter, that you can't. But there's an entire month of joy, an entire month of Purim. It's asking us to live in a different way. And one thing you know about the Torah, they're not joking. It's not like, keep Shabbat. Just kidding. I wanted to see who would go along with it. Really, I got you. It's not what's happening.
Why do we say Tachma?
Sorry?
Why do we say Tachma?
First of all, if you're like most Jews, you like pain. So that's the reason. But I think on a surface level, it's easy to fake joy. In fact, Rambam, when he's talking actually about the joy of Yom Tov, he's careful to point out that oftentimes what we think is joy is not joy at all. En zu simcha ela holelut, en zu simcha ela simchat kreso. Rambam uses different expressions to say that's not joy, that's your tummy rumbling and happy with a big meal. That's not really joy, that's just going wild, having a great time. That's not the Torah's definition of simcha. But if that's the case, we're being asked to do this. We are looking at something which I think is very dangerous. This proclivity towards fake joy. Sometimes it's easy to see when someone's smile is fake. But you know what? If they fake a smile long enough, they get better and better until eventually others can't tell that it's not real. And if they practice more and more, an even more dangerous reality emerges when they can't tell themselves if their joy is real. And all of a sudden they wake up at one point in their life with this pit in their stomach. And out of nowhere, everyone says, they just got divorced. Out of nowhere. It's not out of nowhere. It's 40 years in the making. You didn't notice it, and sometimes they didn't notice it. A child that all of a sudden fails out of school. What happened to this kid? I don't know what happened. It didn't just happen. It happened a long time ago. But he plastered this smile on his face. They were GO president. Because you know what? Sometimes it's easier to just do that and have everyone off your case. So it's difficult in a world of fake smiles to be able to really address this properly. But it's so important that we must do our absolute best. The smiliest people, you read every week in the newspaper about the suicide of celebrities, of Instagrammers, whose picture-perfect life is shattered by the shards of glass that happen when the frame that they hold up to the world breaks and it tears everything apart. What do we do when we have a pandemic of fake smiles? When everyone posts a picture of themselves, so happy, so in love. Look at my kids, look at my family, look at my marriage. Everything is great, my business. And then poof, in the new word that we use for nuclear destruction, GameStop. But my friends, not all smiles were created equal. And it's important as a parent, as a husband, as a father, as a human being to become a connoisseur of smiles. To recognize that some people smile because they're happy. And that is the rarest of smiles. And some people smile because they're embarrassed. Oh, you got up for Shachris? Good Shabbos. They're smiling because they're embarrassed. Some people smile because they're mocking you. We've seen those smiles. Remember them? I remember them. I didn't get here just because I learned in yeshiva. I got here because of deep pain and therapy. But whilst a smile of embarrassment and a smile of mocking and a smile of flattery are all there for a purpose, one, to try and get what they want. They flatter, oh, you're so amazing. You're such a balas chesed. Oh my gosh, I don't know how I would ever live without you. I need another 10,000, right? It's amazing. Those smiles, they're an agenda. Those smiles are there to get something. But there are some smiles, a true smile on the face of a person, it has no purpose whatsoever. It's not trying to get anything. It just is. It represents the outside when the outside and the inside are the same. The Maharal tells us that the word in Hebrew for a person's face is panim, because that is what it's supposed to be when their face, their panim, reflects their pnim, their inside. But it is getting more and more rare to have panim and pnim be the same. So what do? It reminds me of a story of a man who's in a hospital and he's very, very sick. And he just gets the terrible news from his doctor that he's probably only going to survive for another few weeks. Anyway, he's dealing with this devastating news. He feels so bad. He's trying to be brave for his family in the room. And all of a sudden, a nurse sticks her head in with a smile on her face and says, "Be positive." And the guy in the bed loses it. He says, "You!" She says, "Me?" He says, "Come here." And she says in front of the doctor, in front of everyone that's there, "What kind of terrible staff do you train here? Person gets news like this and then someone comes in and gives them this fluff about being positive. It's ridiculous. It's disgusting. It's disgraceful. It's insensitive. I want your name. I want you fired. I want you cancel culture," right? We all deserve to get at least one person fired a week. This is our right. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of firing people. I need to speak to your manager, right? This is what we want, right? So the guy, "Ah!" And he finally finishes and the nurse says, "Are you done?" He's like, "Yeah." She says, I was talking to the doctor. He asked me to tell him what blood type you were. But the crazy thing about a story like that is that actually this concept of be positive is not far off from the truth. Because this idea that the blood that flows in your veins, that the panim actually has a correlation to being positive, is something which not only is true on a Torah level, but also today has the scientific background and backup to be able to show what Chazal and the Torah told us thousands of years ago. You know, there's a researcher, her name was Sonia Lubomirsky. She is clearly not Sephardic. And she, in the University of California, they did a study of over 250,000 people. And they tried all different ways to make them happy. They told them they were getting a raise. They gave them an upgrade in their hotel. They did everything they could imagine. You know, you have 250,000 people. There's a lot of things you could do. I'm sure they found, like the Fruma Chevra, they gave them cholent. Has anyone seen the news? Have you guys seen the news in Bnei Brak? You gotta love this, by the way. You gotta love this. There are people who won't take the vaccine because they're nervous it will cause them problems with fertility and having children. They're not sure that it's been proven. They think it might cause them death. And then they get a phone call and they're told that there's vaccines. They're like, I don't want to take the vaccine. They're like, but there's cholent. Is that not Gavalda? If that's not the most amazing, interpretation of Jewish people, right? But there's cholent. Then I found out that the anti-vaxxer chevra were giving out milcha gedanishes across the street, trying to convince you not to get the vaccine. And I thought, how silly are these people? They don't realize that every yeshiva bacher is first going to go eat the milcha gedanish and then go get the cholent. That's how you rig the system. So they did this unbelievable study. And in this study, they checked and they wanted to see how do they make people happy and how does that happiness stick? And they discovered that happy people are more sociable, they are more altruistic, they like themselves, they like others, they figure out ways to resolve conflict and not stay fighting with other people. It even strengthens the immune system. Things that you never imagined were tied to being happy. It can save your life. Unbelievable. And if that is true, then the fact that people could have better relationships, the fact that people could lead more fulfilling careers, lead longer and happier and healthier lives, it means that there's something here which unlocks mamish, the secret of life. And if we could just tap into it, then maybe there's a way of turning this entire story around. They discovered something shocking, that 50% of being happy, and I'm sure this will make a lot of you happy, 50% of being happy is genetic. So that annoying guy who keeps asking you why you don't have a negative outlook, you're like, have you met my parent? No, right? You understand? Some of it is just genetic. You were born that way. Be positive. You had the blood in your arms. It teaches you the importance of having and raising children in a happy home, okay? But 10% was related to a person's specific life circumstances, but a full 40% was derived. And people's happiness was derived from the way they thought about themselves. Fascinating. So it actually didn't matter. That's a huge number. 40% of your happiness, they figured out, was actually motivated by how you thought of yourself, how you thought your life was going. And I thought that that's such a beautiful thing, because that research answered my question. Mishenichnas Adar, you could flip a switch and be happy? Yup. Because the way you think about yourself, that can change slowly or quickly. How do you change someone's mind? Does that go slow or fast? Well, it kind of depends. If what you're trying to change is something small, then it takes a long time. But if you're giving someone a paradigm shift, then in a second, they can change to the exact opposite of the way they were thinking before. And I want to give you an example of just this idea, something that happened in my kehillah in London years ago. There was a woman who demanded that her husband give her a get. The guy is fighting with his wife. He doesn't want to get divorced. Let's try and make it work. Da-da-da. The whole family gets involved. Everyone's trying to convince this lady. She needs to start getting her act together. She needs to stop being so selfish. She needs to think about the kids. And the woman, bishela, I want to get. I want to get. I want to get. I want to get. Today, a lot of marriages are ruined by the fact that there's a taxi company called Get. But either way, Rabbi say, this is the story. Okay? She comes along, and the brother-in-law asks to speak to her. He says, listen, I'm only going to try this once. I know my brother very well. He's such a nice guy. I know my brother really wants to make it work. How could you do this? How could you? And she's just sitting there with her eyes like fish eyes. Like, you know when you bring the fish to the table on Shabbos, and the eyes are just like that. No emotion, no engagement. And he's trying everything to raise her on to get some reaction. Nothing. And he starts yelling and screaming. Don't you know the statistics of the children? And after he finishes his whole piece, his sister-in-law doesn't say one word. She just looks him in the eye, and she moves her shirt a little bit to the side. And then she moves her shirt on the other side a little bit to the side. And then she rolls up her sleeve halfway to her elbow. And he could see all the black and blue marks that were covered by her clothing. Then she rolls her sleeve back down. And she fixes her shirt again. And the brother-in-law has nothing to say. And in 1 second he goes from thinking his sister-in-law is the cruelest Reshanta in the world to realizing that she's a victim of a brother that he doesn't know at all. That's a paradigm shift. That doesn't take a long time to see something differently. When something goes in such a radical way, it changes everything. And how long does it take? 1 second. My friends, Adar is a paradigm shift. It's one which has the capacity to change your mind in a second. Pay close attention to the words of the Pasuk in the Megillah. The Pasuk says that Mordechai wrote down all of these things. Vayishlach sefarim el kol haYehudim, to all the Jewish people. He sends these books with everything that happened. He wrote it all down, sent it out to everybody in all the cities of the kingdom, in order that they should keep the holiday of Purim. Kayamim asher nachu bahem haYehudim me'oivehem, according to those days that they were saved from the enemies. Ve'achodesh, and the month that was switched from yagon, from intense agony, l'simcha, to joy. Me'evel, from mourning, liyom tov, to a day of celebration, to a holiday. La'asot otam yimei mishteh v'simcha u'mishloach manot ish l're'eh u'matanot le'evyonim. My friends, the power of the month of Adar to give birth to instantaneous happiness is because it carries within it the capacity to change our minds. To help us see that the worst things in our experience perhaps are not as they present themselves to be. Otherwise, why is the Pasuk in the Megillah telling us, you know why this month is joy? Me'evel liyom tov. Miyagon l'simcha. Just tell me, because it's a month of simcha. It's a month of Yom Tov. No, that doesn't do it. It's the distance between those two things, the disparity between those two poles, that lets someone change their mind on a dime. And the minute Adar begins, we can change. The Chidushei Harim says that these words, Mishenichnas Adar, doesn't mean when Adar comes in. It means when Adar penetrates. Mishenichnas Adar. Marbim b'simcha. It's not a mitzvah then to be joyful. It's a result. When you start to recognize all that happened in that story, suddenly every bad thing in your life maybe is not as bad as you think it is. So Rabotai, how do we capture this lightning in a bottle and bring this kind of happiness into our own lives? There are two things that are described after all the research of 250,000 people in the University of California. I could have saved them some time if they would have sat with me and learned the ancient Judaism, the wisdom of Judaism, because we had it straight there. The first thing that they discovered was that one of the most powerful catalysts to change your experience to joy is to write a gratitude journal. To write down how lucky you are to have such people in your life. To write down how good these things, how good you have it. Even tiny things. You have a beautiful house. You have a fantastic wife. You have an excellent child. You know what? You bought a new car. Not only that, maybe you have hair. Maybe your hair is good hair. I don't know what it is that makes you smile. But whatever it is, however small it is, to write those things down. Where do we see this? That's what the pasuk begins with. You know how we instituted a month of joy? Vayichtov Mordechai. He wrote it down in a book, sent it out. Guys, read this whenever you're feeling down. Beginning of the month of Adar, I'm making sure that every year you read the story so that you will bring joy once again into your lives. The first thing is to be able to write these things down so that we're capable of remembering them. Rabotai, but there's something fascinating about what happens when we write down all these things, when we ensure that we remember them. And you know what that is? They realized something fantastic. There were two researchers whose names were Bovin and Gilovich. And they asked the question, if you had money to spend and you wanted to make yourself feel happier. So there's something called retail therapy, right? What would you do? Should you go buy stuff, right? Should you go buy stuff? Or should you spend the money on an experience? I don't know, on a vacation, should you spend, which is going to make you happier? Go skydiving, right? Which is going to make you happier? Push your wife out and skydiving, which is going to make you happier? Where should you go? And they actually analyzed this in an amazingly and aptly named book. The name of their book was called To Do or To Have? That is the question. Talk about truth in advertising, okay? Now, if I stopped just stop, pause for 1 second, guys. What would you think? What's going to make you happier? An experience, the minute it's over, you don't have it anymore. Temporary. A thing that you buy, surely, at least after you use it, you still have it. You bought yourself a suit. You could use the suit again and again. Shoes. Logic would dictate that you should buy things. But actually, in their research, they realized that it wasn't things that made people happier for longer. It was experiences. And why is that? And this is so important. I call this the theory of smelling bread. You walk into a room and it has the smell of fresh bread. Hits you like a wall. Gewaldig bread, fantastic. You know what's interesting? Stay in that room for 5 minutes, you can't smell bread anymore. You get used to it. You walk out of the room, the only way to smell bread again is to walk out of the room and walk back in the room. That's the only way. The funny thing about things in our lives is that whatever we have, we get so used to it that we become blinded to it. If you have a good marriage, you don't appreciate a good marriage because you have it. If you have great kids that never cause you any tzaras, you're not worried about that. You're just worried about shidduchim. You're not realizing that all these other people are worrying about their kids right now in school. They have a problem with this rabbi and a problem with that teacher and a problem here and a problem there. But if you have it, you don't notice it. And it turns out, therefore, that actually if you want to know what happiness is not a thing. It's not a destination. The word pursuit of happiness makes no sense whatsoever, because if you're running after it, by definition, it's not something you'll ever catch, because happiness, bimitzius, in its reality, is an awareness of something which causes gratitude. One more time. The nature of happiness is an awareness of something which causes gratitude. So if you have the smell of delicious bread and you can't smell it anymore, the only way to be happy about it is to leave it and come back. That's why we always say that you only appreciate something once you lose it. Not because you lost it, because now you notice that it's gone. You don't have to lose it to appreciate it. If your friend comes around and tells you about all of the tzoros of his marriage, you start appreciating your wife, don't you? You know why? Not because you didn't lose your wife, but because someone helped you leave the room and come back in and smell the bread or the coffee. Rabotai, that's why it's not a bracha in the Amidah. 2 reasons. Number 1, Hashem can't give you an awareness. That's up to you to maintain. Because even if Hashem gave it to you, the irony is if God gave you joy, you would become unaware of joy because you have it. It's a consistent dedication to remaining with your eyes open, focused on everything and all the brachot that God gave you. That's answer number 1. But a better answer, like they say in the yeshiva world, he's saying good. Say better. Say better. I always thought that line right there is the source of all the self-confidence problems we have in yeshiva Bachrim. He's saying good. He's saying good. This is fascinating. There's a better answer. My first answer is, that's why there's no bracha on simcha, on joy. My second answer is, there is a bracha on joy. If joy is awareness that leads you to gratitude, to hakarat hatov, there's a bracha for that. It's called modim. Modim anachnu lach is a bracha on simcha, on joy. Isn't that fascinating? Think about that for a minute. This time, when you say that, you bow in front of Hashem, illustrating. It's different than the bowings before and the bowings after. It's its own thing. You're bowing and you're recognizing the goodness of everything that you have in your life. You're starting again. Modim anachnu lach al chayenu hamisurim biyadecha. I'm not thanking Hashem for my car. I'm starting way at the bottom. I'm thanking Hashem, I'm alive. Do you think about the fact that you're alive? Only in COVID we think about the fact that we're alive. Do you think about breathing? Only in COVID are we thinking about breath. About, are you with me? So answer number 1 is the ability to draw your attention and your awareness to what it is that you have. But the second thing that they discovered that made people happy, happier than having anything, happier than having, was giving. And that is the second part of the pasuk. Why is this a month of happiness? Because it's mishloach manot ish l're'ehu umatanot le'evyonim. The power of being able to give to somebody. Number 1, because when you give it to someone, you recognize that you had it to give away. But actually, I'd like to take it one step further. There was a Rav whose name was Rav Mishkovsky. And Rav Galinsky remembers when he was a young man that he came to ask the children in the town a riddle. He asked them, if you have 5 candles that are burning and you put out 2 of them, how many candles do you have left? Every kid. 3. Nope. Then you had the kid that was bad at math. 1. Nope. Then you have that philosophical kid. Bicycle, right? You had lots of different answers, but none of them were right. And then finally the kids asked him, how many candles you have left? And Rav Mishkovsky said, you have 2 candles. Because if you extinguish 2 candles, the other 3 burnt themselves out. And you had no candles. You put out 2 candles, you have 2 candles left. And he looked at all these kids, and he said to them, Kinderlach, I want you to always remember that everybody thinks that you have things in your life, and the way you hold on to them is by keeping them to yourself. But what happens? You keep spending that money, usually on stupid things. But if you gave some of that away, it sits there waiting for you in the world to come. It sits there waiting for you like that experience in your own mind, remembering that you had something and you gave something and you made someone alive. What a wonderful thing to enliven yourself. What do you have? What you gave. That's what you have. Rav Galinsky found himself at the end of the war going from concentration camp to concentration camp to try and find the Jewish kids to sign up to schools. And in some places they found 2 children, and in some they found 3 children, and some they found 5, and finally he gets to one place that had more children than any other place that he'd been to. The man that sent him on this mission was Rav Gershon Liebman, a rock that got the funds from the various Hatzalah organizations to be able to start Jewish education again. And he went from place to place to try and gather the children. He finally gets to this one place, okay? He finally gets to this one place. Has more kids than any of the other places, and he's so excited. And he comes to the man in charge and he says, I'm here to bring these Jewish kids to a yeshiva. And the man says, who sent you? Tell me it was anyone but the Agudah. I hate the Agudah. Anyway, he knows that some of the funds come from the Agudah. He goes, no, I wasn't sent by the Agudah. I was sent by someone, by an individual, which was true. And the man says, yes, but who's funding that individual? Tell me it's not the Agudah. I hate the Agudah. He says, no, I'm an emissary of Hashem. He says, tell me the truth. Who sent you? He says, Rav Gershon Liebman. The man's face and demeanor changed instantly. He says, if that's who sent you, not only am I not going to get in your way, I will get you every single child signed up. Whatever you need, you'll have. And Rav Galinsky says, what brought about this unbelievable change? And he says, I'll tell you, I remember back in the day when we were all in the camp together and I had Rav Gershon Liebman in my bunk, in my barracks. And you know what it was like back then. There was no food. People were dying not of gas or shootings. They were dying because they had no nutrition left in their veins, in their bones. They couldn't get themselves up out of bed to wait online for a cup of soup and a slice of bread. And they died in their bunks, exhausted, not from a hit, not from gas, not from a bullet, from pure starvation and exhaustion beyond which the human body could not manage. And I remember one morning, he says, there was a young boy, a great young boy, a yeshiva boy whose name was Avram Rosalimsky. And the day came when he came back from the work and he couldn't get up off the bed. And they told him, come, you need to get up off the bed. You need to get the food. If you don't eat, you're going to die. Push yourself. And he just couldn't. He says, just go. We all felt terrible, but we had our own lives to worry about. So we went, we ate it online, and every one of us came back with a cup of soup and a little piece of bread, and we ate. Most of us had finished it on the way back to the barracks, but some of us managed to eat it there, sitting there. Everyone but one person, everyone but Reb Gershon Liebman, who came back from waiting online, and who took Avram Rosalimsky, who could barely sit up, and he leaned him against the wall, and he started spooning the soup into his mouth. He was so weak he couldn't even keep his mouth open. So the soup was running down his chin, spilling onto his body. The precious soup was getting lost. And then he took the bread and he couldn't chew. And he took little pieces and he helped him push his mouth up and down so he could chew and swallow the bread. He says, I watched Rav Gershon Liebman go hungry that day, a day where not one of us had the luxury of taking a day off from food. And he gave everything for someone else. That's who sent you. Whatever you need, you'll have. And I thought to myself when I read this, I don't know for sure, because I wasn't there, Baruch Hashem, none of us were. But I dare say that at the end of that day, Rav Gershon Liebman went to bed with more energy flowing through his veins from having fed someone else than from having fed himself. Mishloach manot ish l're'ehu. The Gemara Megillah says on page 7, Abaya bar Avin v'Rav Chanina bar Avin mechalfi sudatayu lehadadi. Neither one of them had enough food to be able to give to Mishloach manot, but they were desperate to do the mitzvah. So what did they do? I took my bread and my cup of soup and I gave it to you, and you took yours and you gave it to me. We both had Seudah of Purim and we both had Mishloach Manot. My friends, what the Pasuk is telling you is that you could have a slice of bread and a cup of soup. You don't have another one to give to anybody else. That's all that you have, and you could still fulfill the mitzvah. and you could still have simcha in your life. I think a lot of us feel that way now. Rabbi, I'm holding it together by a thread. Stop talking to me about helping other people. Mechalfi sudatayu ahadadi. Take some of what you got and give it to him, and let him take the same and give it to you. In yeshiva, we had a little musavad going on. We would talk to one another about getting better in midot. And you know what one of the things we decided was? We tried to find simple ways where people could improve themselves and do wonderful things that didn't cost them anything. So you know what? We had a pact that every boy would pour the other guy water. Because when you pour yourself water, there's no mitzvah. But when you pour the other guy water, you got a mitzvah. Free mitzvah! Woo! Awesome, right? We can give to other people. And the ability to give makes a person feel alive like almost nothing else. I want to end our words tonight with this powerful idea. In Lashon Kodesh, the letters of words are more important than just the phonetic sounds like in other nations' languages. They are essential. They are connected to the root of the word itself. The word for simcha, for joy, in Hebrew, simcha, ironically also has within it the same letters rearranged, spell the word chamisha. Because the nature of simcha is the process, as we said, of being aware of what it is that you have and finding within that the ability to be grateful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for whatever it is. Interestingly enough, those same letters in Hebrew also spell the word hemchesh, which means to visualize, to bring something to your awareness, to illustrate. A person who is aware and they are living their life through their senses. They see what they have, they taste what they have, and they're not worried about what they didn't buy, what they didn't taste. A person like that who's experiencing his present world sees only a world of chasadim, of kindness, of joy, of opportunity. The famous writer Lao Tzu wrote, if you were depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. And if you are at peace, you must be living in the present. Depressed people look back at their experiences and say to themselves, if that's how bad it was yesterday, mistama, that's how bad it's going to be tomorrow. They don't take the words at the end of all those financial commercials you hear on the radio seriously. Past performance is not indicative of future results. If you're anxious, what are you anxious about? About what's coming. About what's gonna happen. About the chasana I have to make. About the yeshiva I'm gonna have to pick for my child. Right? That's what anxiety is. But for a person to live in simcha, they need to live in the present. They need to rely not on their worries about tomorrow, but about their current interaction, their sensory interaction with the most magnificent world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created for each of us. With the ability to give to one another even when we have so little. And that, my friends, is I think how we find simcha even in this challenging time. To end off with Rab Galinsky's powerful idea, he was once in one of the camps and he saw a man get up in the middle of the night. And the man got up and he reached under his bed and he pulled out from under his bed a uniform. And the guy's thinking, what is this guy doing? And he starts putting on this uniform. He was a French guy, right? Which made him realize that that's probably why he was strange. But either way, he reached down underneath. He put on this French uniform of a soldier with all the little falafels on the shoulder, and he's walking around like this. The guy's a prisoner in a concentration camp, and he's pulling out this uniform. He thinks he's a general. The guy's thinking Nebuch. He probably stole it from one of the from Canada, in Auschwitz. He probably took it from one of the bags, and now he's walking around, fanat himself into thinking that this is who. Anyway, he waits 2 days, 3 days. Eventually, the guy keeps doing it every night. So he thinks to himself, if I'm going to see this show every night when I'm doing Tikkun Chatzos, I want to know what's going on. So he waits, and while the guy's walking around, he walks in and he says, hey! The guy's startled. He starts to rip off the jacket so they won't catch him. He says, what are you doing? And the man says, shh, shh. He says, tell me, what are you doing? He says, quiet, I'll tell you, just lower your voice. Pulls him over to the side and he says, you know, they have me cleaning toilets here. This is my life. I shovel up other people's feces, their bodily fluids. That's what I am. That's what I do. I have nobody. I have no food. I have no hope. And I was about to lose it until I started to remember that this is not who I am. Before I came here, I was a French general, which, if you know anything about history, is not all that impressive. I was a French general, he says. People listened to me. They entrusted troops to me. They trusted my decisions. I was important. So every night for a couple of minutes, when everyone is asleep, I take out the clothes, I put them on, I walk around the room like I used to, and I remember that I am not a person who shovels the stuff out of the toilets. That's not who I am. That's just who I am now. The clothing of the general is enough to make him feel like the general again. Sometimes we're powerful enough to remember and to visualize, to be mamchish, what it is that we were when we were at our best, when we were spending time in yeshiva, or when we were in seminary, or when our emunah was strong, or when the business was going well. We remember the suit. We remember how we felt when we looked like $1 million, when we felt like $1 million, when $1 million was enough to retire on. But sometimes we're actually not even strong enough to remember those clothes. And the biggest chesed you could do for someone is to help them remember the clothes that they once wore. To help them remember that this is not who you are, this is who you are right now. But Yeshuat Hashem is keheref ayin, it comes in the blink of an eye. And don't worry about what was, and don't worry about what will be. Just enjoy this piece of bread and this cup of soup. Just enjoy the fact that if you're home from work because of COVID, you're with your family. There are people who are home alone. And in your weakest times, when you think that you'd rather be alone because your kids are making that much noise, hold off. Think about what that really means. Is that really what you want? Start to taste and to feel the clothing of a French general, to feel the clothing of an Abba, of a husband, of a father, of a Jew, of a person who's alive, of a person who's not on a ventilator. And feel the strength come back. And with that awareness comes gratitude, and with that gratitude comes happiness. When we redefine joy, we realize that it is just a second away, and that we can indeed allow Adar to enter into us, to permeate our souls, and to feel the greatest simcha imaginable. Thank you very much. Chazal tell us on the mitzvah of kabed et avicha ve'et imecha, honoring your parents, that the concept of kaved, it's a very strange word. Kaved means to honor, but the word kaved also means heavy. Why would the word kavod and kaved be something which are interchangeable? And the answer is, like as an example, something which is kalut rosh, koved rosh, means a lightness of head, or something which you take seriously. Is something light, or is something a weighty matter, okay? The ultimate way that a person can show honor to their parents is by making the parent weigh something. What are they? Today we live in a world, as I said, where everything is fake. So also our language is fake. You tell a kid, oh, you're amazing, beste Yingel, such a good kid. Those words actually mean nothing to the child. And in some cases, experts tell us, are damaging to the kid. You know why? Because the kid doesn't feel amazing. You're telling him he's amazing. What does he feel now? Further from the expectations you said. If you told him he's average, the kid could accept it. But you told him he's amazing, he feels like an even bigger fraud and an even bigger imposter. So what's the secret, they say? To find something specific that you can attribute to that child. I work with sometimes young people who have very difficult relationships with their parents. And oftentimes they say, he gave me less, than he gave all the other kids, and he did this wrong, and she did that wrong. And I always say, I get that they did things wrong. There's not a parent on earth that's perfect. Could you think of one thing that they did that was positive? That's how you start to build. When you have someone who was never a general, even if they never were a general, they were something in general. They were something. You have a kid, by the way, the kid that never learned in yeshiva. Right? He's always running out of the base medrash. Anyone needs any help? A guest comes, the guy's up like a shot from his Gemara. Do you need something? Do you want to sit somewhere? Why? Because he's... So mitzad echad, on one side, the guy is not a good learner. Mitzad sheni, what an amazing thing that he's emulating his great-great-grandfather, his Elta Zayda, Avraham Avinu. Ve'el habakar ratz Avraham. It doesn't say, Ve'el masechet Bikarot Ratz Avraham. Running to Chesed is a beautiful thing. What would Avraham Avinu have been doing if not for the fact that he was running to go help somebody? Probably sitting and learning. And what did he do? He got up to be able to do the mitzvah that was there and present in front of him. So you have mashkichim, you have rabbis, you have parents that all they see is a kid that doesn't want to learn. He can't settle down. Yeah, true. But is there something you could find? I'll never forget when I went to parents' evening with my children in one of the schools that my kids went to, which shall remain nameless. My wife would hate going to parents' evening with me. She would always be kicking me under the table. I went once and the teacher says, your daughter, she didn't come on time, she didn't do the homework, she didn't pay attention, she didn't contribute, she didn't, she finally finishes her entire diatribe. It's the only way I could describe it. And I said, how long has my daughter been in your class? She says, what do you mean? Like from the beginning of the year? So I said, 6 months. 6 months? She goes, yeah, I guess 6 months. So I said, wow, that's amazing. In 6 months, my daughter didn't do one thing right? Not one thing? I came here to hear about how my daughter did. You did very well. Aleph plus. God, A for effort on bashing my daughter into the ground. You're amazing at negativity. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Not one positive thing? Ooh, my leg was black and blue from my wife. I said to my wife after that, I said, honey, you want to buy more shoes? Just softer shoes. Like the Bubby shoes. You know the Bubby shoes that basically look like a cloud? Can we get those? You don't have to wear them ever, just on the nights. Parents' evening. The teacher's like, oh, no. Of course. She did this, and suddenly she came up with things. In Jewish we say, mitamo. All of a sudden she found some things to say. But until you pulled it out, some people are like that. Some parents are like that. Some teachers are like that. And sometimes, as a parent, as a friend, you have to be the one that stands in there and says, garnished? Nothing good? Nothing? It was like, oh my, nothing. Your question, it's not nogea. There's not a single person on earth that you can't find something positive about. So I think what most parents do by mistake, because I remember this when I was young. When you're sitting down at the table and your parents say, you should really eat that. There are children in Africa who are starving. And every kid says, send them my vegetables. Win. It doesn't work to tell someone, there are other people who are worse off than you. Because when we're in that ball and all we want to do is feel sorry for ourselves, it's sometimes not always so easy to be able to do that. And that's when it takes a creative person, mechanech, to be able to kind of bring somebody out. You know, I still remember we had someone a student that I was dealing with as well in London, who had a very difficult life. And she could not find anything in her life to be happy about. So she decided that, you know what, her life was not worth living, because if this is what her life is, you know, toiv moisi michaye. So I said to her, I tried every which way, and she was seeing the professionals and they were getting nowhere either. I said to her, look, you want to kill yourself? You want to go? Go. I said, but until you go, you're around, could you make yourself useful? She's like, what do you mean? I said, well, I have this girl who's actually in the hospital. She's suffering from some of the same things that you did. You know the matzav over there. Like, you know which nurses you could talk to. You know how to help her a little bit, right? You know, I said, look, the last thing you do before you go, at least maybe go and help someone else learn the ropes a little bit. Overnight, this kid became like the hospital patient liaison. And what happened? Secret. She started feeling good about herself. You see, when you tell the person that their matziv is not as bad as they think, they keep grabbing it back like a baby who's grabbing the pacifier, the security blanket. No, it's bad. It's worse. And anything you say, you can't compare it. My situation is worse. You don't understand. You don't understand. Nobody understands. Don't even bother fighting with them. Set them up with a matziv, with a situation that allows them to see what they have. She came back after that first meeting. I said, it's unbelievable. You know, you're so lucky. She said, what do you mean? I said, you're so lucky that you have people in your life that actually care about whether or not you're here or are not. You know, some people in there, they don't have that. And she didn't agree, and she didn't break out the streamers, but she heard. She heard. It went in. It went into the gratitude journal. You know what I mean? That's the nature, unfortunately. Sometimes what we need to be able to do is to kind of reset that balance, to be able to smell what it is that we really have. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why when Chazal tell us, you know, yoter mima she'ashir oseim he'ani, more than what the rich man does for the poor man, he'ani oseim he'ashir, the poor person does for the rich man. You know what I always thought? Why? What do you mean? He gave to the other guy? No. The rich guy gave the poor guy a sandwich. The poor guy gave the rich guy an appreciation for his steak and his pickles and his soda and his coffee and his house and his... Who got more here? Unbelievable. Like, you realize it that way. Maybe that's what the ani gives to the ashir. He helps him remember his clothes. So sometimes you have to set up situations for a child, for a person to be able to actually see it, where it's not a conversation, it's just a penny drop. It's one of those paradigm shifts that we spoke about.